everyone joining us. This is a live Twitter on the official IDF Twitter page. My name is Jonathan. I'm a reserve IDF spokesperson, and I'm here today to share the situation on the ground from Israel for all of you, all of our hundreds of thousands, more than almost millions of followers around the world, all of you watching, wanting to know what's going on in Israel, caring, worried, hearing the news about today's atrocities against Israeli civilians and soldiers by Hamas. My aim here is to provide you with our information, the situation on the ground as it is today, currently, what tomorrow holds, and what we're planning on doing in response to these barbaric attacks against our civilians. I'll try to take a few questions at the end, but I really hope that this live will be informative and will provide all of you, our friends and supporters around the world, and people who are perhaps not even friends and supporters of Israel, but want to know what's going on, with information from the ground, verified information from the ground. So this is a very sad day in Israel. It started early morning hours with a combined, unprecedented attack against Israeli civilians and the military. Hamas terrorists. Today we can assume that there were high number of hundreds of terrorists that crossed from Gaza into Israel. They attacked dozens of Israeli communities and IDF bases, and they went door to door, house to house in search of Israeli civilians, executed in cold blood Israeli civilians in their homes, and then continued to drag into Gaza Israeli civilians and military personnel. And in terms of the civilians, I'm talking women, children, elderly, disabled, that were dragged into Gaza by the terrorists from the Gaza Strip. The numbers are unprecedented. We're talking about more than 200 Israelis that have been killed, and I can say with sadness that these are not the final figures. As the night unfolds and as tomorrow will come, that number will unfortunately rise. And we have sustained more than 1,200 Israeli casualties, both military and civilian. These are numbers that have never been heard before in Israel, definitely not that amount of Israeli civilians being killed, and that is unfortunately not the end of it. I am sad to say that we have a significant number of Israelis held by Hamas in Gaza, both civilians and soldiers, alive and presumed dead, at numbers that were up until now unimaginable. The number of civilians and military that are inside Gaza, held captive by Hamas, and this will shape and influence the future of this war against Israel, and it will shape the future of what we're doing against Hamas. As we speak, you can see the skyline of Tel Aviv behind me. It's currently quiet. I don't think it will remain quiet for the entire night, but we'll wait and see. There have been heavy barrages of rockets towards central Israel and southern Israel throughout the entire day. It started early morning, and the last big barrage of rockets was a few hours ago. More than 3,000 rockets have been fired at Israel, aimed at Israeli civilians, and unfortunately they have claimed a heavy toll in human life in Israel as well. Thanks to the Iron Dome, we have not sustained tremendous casualties from the rockets that have been fired. The overwhelming majority of the casualties that we have sustained have been from close contact fighting, or rather executions and cold-blooded killings of Israeli civilians and soldiers by Hamas terrorists. As we're speaking, the situation in Israel is still not fully under control. There's still fighting ongoing in southern Israel. There are still Hamas terrorists inside Israel, and Israeli special forces and IDF troops are fighting, going house to house and making sure that each and every community is clear and rid of all of the terrorists that crossed into the reserves. Jonathan here. We are live from Tel Aviv, and I would like to give you our daily update about the situation. I know that many of you around the world, our followers, want to know what's happening. You're hearing things coming out of Israel. Perhaps you're seeing stuff in the media or on your other feeds, and you want to know exactly what's happening on the ground. That is what I want to give you here. We have a map, and I will show you a few things on the map, the situation on the ground. And today we're going to focus on the situation around the Gaza Strip, recent discoveries of the Hamas atrocities that are now being exposed to the world. We'll speak about that. Then we'll zoom in on the Gaza Strip, tell you a little bit about Hamas's infrastructure there, what they have above the ground and below the ground, and some stuff about what we've been doing over the last 2, 3, and 4 days. Then we'll jump up north and we'll speak about the Lebanese front and the Syrian front. Hopefully, all that will be tied in about 10 minutes, and I'd like for you to stay for this entire talk. Let's begin. So, as you can see on the map, zooming in on the state of Israel, and we're going down south, looking at in greater detail at the Gaza Strip. Here's the Gaza Strip, and the first place that I want to go, which is today really the talk of the day, is the Israeli kibbutz called Be'eri. You can see it here in the middle, in the center of the screen, Be'eri, Beeri, a small kibbutz about a mile from the border. Here it's zoomed in. In a second, I'll show you how close it is to the Gaza Strip. This is how the place looked before the morning of Saturday, October the 7th. This isn't, unfortunately, how it looks today. All the houses, almost all the houses, were either destroyed or burnt. All the greenery is unfortunately gone, either burnt or uprooted. And much of the beautiful infrastructure in this, what used to be a peaceful community, is no longer as it was. Today, international media were given access to this place, Be'eri. As you can see here now on the map, this is where Be'eri is, and this is the border with the Gaza Strip. Right? And if we zoom out a little bit more, we can see that it's not so far from the city of Gaza. Be'eri is here. Here's Gaza City. Most of the terrorists who invaded in and eventually attacked Be'eri came from the eastern outskirts of Gaza City, Sajaiya, and a few other neighborhoods. Surely they came from the south and even from the central parts of the Gaza Strip. What is important is what the Hamas terrorists did inside Be'eri. Today, many outlets of the international media were granted access. Reporters went in to this community, and I heard a seasoned, salty international journalist, a war journalist who has been to Ukraine and many other battlefields around the world. He walked around Be'eri and saw the sights, saw what's left of the houses, smelled the smells that are still there in Be'eri, and listened to some of the stories of the soldiers who came there as first responders and who actually fought in the kibbutz and were able to kill the many countless terrorists who came into that kibbutz in order to murder our civilians. And what he said is that it's the worst thing that he has ever seen. And this is a person who works in war environments. What was so bad? The reports coming out of Be'eri are of civilians with their hands tied behind their backs that were executed, of children whose bodies lay shot and mutilated on the ground outside of the houses, of families that were burnt inside their houses because Hamas terrorists couldn't get into their safe room, so they burnt the house, causing them either to burn inside or to suffocate, and countless, about 100 Israeli bodies being picked up in body bags and taken by coroners to be brought to a central facility in Tel Aviv and then for proper burial by their loved ones. Those are the experiences coming out of Be'eri today. Another testament for the world to see the barbarity, the cruelty, and the inhumane, monstrous activities of Hamas here. And again, making it so abundantly clear for anybody who had any doubts what it is that we are facing and why we must take urgent, strong, and decisive action against this terror organization. So that's the sad story of Be'eri. Yesterday, the world learned firsthand about what happened in Kfar Aza, another kibbutz about a mile north from there, and the stories of atrocities are similar. And we spoke about that yesterday. The numbers are chilling. We are talking about together in these two communities, Kfar Aza and Be'eri. Kfar Aza and Be'eri, together, more than 200 dead Israelis were found in these two communities. And Be'eri used to have a population of 1,000 people, about 1,000 people, a small and close-knit community. More than 100 of the people who live there are today gone. And that's without factoring in many of the kibbutz members who have been taken hostage and dragged into Gaza by Hamas. So those are the two events that, or the two places that the world learned more about today. So whenever anybody asks questions about why is Israel fighting and what's this all about, two very good, sad, extremely sad examples to answer that question is Kfar Aza and Be'eri, because those are two places where some of the greatest, darkest atrocities were perpetrated by Hamas. If we'll zoom out a bit and have a look at the entire Gaza Strip, we have Gaza City in the north, Khan Yunis, a larger city in the south, and then Rafah here, the Egyptian border, and this here is the Sinai Peninsula and Egypt. If we zoom out and look at this area, then all of this area has sustained quite a lot of attacks from the IDF, from the air. We have been targeting Hamas infrastructure, which is scattered all over the Gaza Strip. There's not a single location in the Gaza Strip that isn't fully packed with Hamas infrastructure. Let's zoom in on the city of Gaza. Here you can see the city of Gaza, the center city, and a few of the more important neighborhoods. This area here is the Rimal neighborhood, which houses many of the homes, offices, and command facilities of Hamas seniors. Many of those facilities are no longer there because we struck them, because they belong to Hamas and they serve Hamas's military purposes. And similar stories in other locations around the Gaza Strip, in the city of Khan Yunis, as you can see here in the central southern part, and also in the area of Rafah. By the way, Rafah, this area here, this side is Egypt and this side is the Gaza Strip. If we could provide you with an image that penetrates the ground and shows you what's underground, what we would be seeing here is a network of tunnels that goes from the Egyptian side to the Palestinian side to Gaza. That network of tunnels, smuggling tunnels, is how all of the weapons got into the Gaza Strip. It's something that we need to remember for the future. So what's been going on in the Gaza Strip and the current situation is that there's been quite a sustained aerial campaign. We have struck many targets in the Gaza Strip. All of the targets that we are striking are military targets. Now, I'd like to say a few things about that. You may have seen footage coming out of the Gaza Strip today, and it looks bad. It doesn't look pretty. Lots of destroyed buildings and lots of destructions. Basically looks like a war zone. Now, for the untrained eye, for somebody who doesn't know what all of this is about, you might think that these are civilian buildings. And you might wrongly think that the IDF is striking civilian facilities. Not so. Hamas uses civilian infrastructure for their military purposes, and this isn't new. They use, instead of having military bases and locations that are proper military perimeters and locations, Hamas chooses to act differently. They use civilian buildings, they use civilian residential areas, and they use other buildings that don't look military, but they serve military purposes. When we strike them, we know what we're striking. We're striking military facilities. For the untrained eye, it may look as if it is civilian infrastructure, and this area in Gaza is unfortunately full of it. Let's zoom out. Around the Gaza Strip, in most of the locations here, just to the north, close to kibbutz Nativ HaAsara, and then close to the city of Sderot, where there were many, many Israeli casualties on the morning of the 7th of October. And all of these areas, there are now lots of Israeli troops, reserve troops in tanks and armored personnel carriers, APCs, and other military vehicles, gearing up, preparing, and getting ready to execute the next stage of Israeli operations. All options are on the table. I'm not going to commit here what and when we are going to do. I'm just saying that there's 300,000 reserve soldiers outside of the Gaza Strip, and they are getting ready to execute the missions that we have been tasked by the Israeli government. Quickly, let's move north and say a few words about what happened today along our northern border. So I moved to the north, and we are now along the northern border. This is the border between Israel, the city of Haifa here, Lake Tiberias or Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee here, and then the border between Israel and Lebanon is this thick line here, and then Syria in this area. Today, Hezbollah released a video where they are proud of the fact that they fired an anti-tank missile towards Israeli soldiers. They released a video today. The attack was yesterday. There was a wounded Israeli soldier. There were also many alarms today that went off in northern Israel. Practically all of northern Israel, the alarms in Haifa and above, we had alarms going off. That was a result of a Hezbollah UAV that was active in the area and what appears to have been a malfunction in our alarm and alert system. Israelis, unfortunately, were called into shelters. After a short review of the incident, we understood that we could safely sound the all clear, and Israelis went back out. And we are, of course, looking into how it happened and to make sure that it won't happen again. The important thing is that the systems are ready and that we are monitoring closely along this border each and every movement of Hezbollah, looking what they're doing, and of course preparing on our side for any type of aggression. Worth to mention is that in the Mediterranean, somewhere here, is an American battle group which has made its way over to our neck of the woods at the direct order of the US president. And they have carried very important messages to the region, messages of deterrence against any of the other Iranian proxies in the region. The US president said basically in one word, if you're thinking about attacking Israel, don't. And I think that's a very succinct way of addressing the situation for the benefit of civilians all over the region. So as we zoom out and summarize, I'd say that we have three active fronts, the main one being the southern front in Gaza, and we are looking vigilant in the north and following events closely on the Golan Heights on the border with Syria as well. We are now nearing the 6th day of this war that was forced upon us. We are preparing ourselves for the next stages of our activities. We have struck a lot of targets in Gaza, and we will continue to do so using the Air Force, and we are preparing ourselves for the next stages. There were minor skirmishes in the south today, less than the day before, and that's always a good sign. But we know and understand that this is a long process, and we have to be very vigilant in the south, because both Hamas and the Islamic Jihad continue to try to get across the border and to threaten Israeli civilians. I hope you find this useful. I hope you like our content. We try very much to bring you a daily summary of what's going on so that you can be informed and understand the complexity of what's going on, where Israel is, what we're threatened by, and what we're planning to do against those threats. If you find it useful, share it with your friends and make sure that as many people as possible see our content. I thank you for watching, and I wish you a quiet and peaceful day, and thanks for your support.